In this second part, or in this second section, we are going to talk about the causes of World War II. So, and our first cause on the list, or our first point, is Germany's invasion of Poland. That was in 1st September 1939. So the invasion of Poland was the immediate cause of the Second World War. After coming to power in 1933, Adolf Hitler aimed to destroy the Treaty of Versailles, expand German territory, and create a greater German empire. Hitler believed Germany needed Lebensraum. So Lebensraum, that is a German word which means living space, in Eastern Europe for its growing population and economic needs. So in simple terms, Lebensraum, or living space, actually referred to expanding German territory and acquiring more land on which German citizens could be instated, or German citizens could settle and grow more food and expand their population. So it is what Hitler called Lebensraum, or living space, but he mostly targeted Eastern Europe. Now, on 1st September 1939, Germany launched a surprise attack on Poland using the Blitzkrieg, or lightning war. Now, the Blitzkrieg was Hitler's military strategy in which he used massive air power, or massive air bombardments, then followed by infantry movements. So aeroplanes would be used to throw tons of bombs onto the city, and then following that airstrike, then infantry movements of German soldiers would march towards that territory and they conquer it. So it is what is called Blitzkrieg, or lightning war, which was Hitler's strategy. So using the Blitzkrieg strategy, which involved the rapid attacks using aircraft, tanks, and infantry, Hitler also wanted to recover territories lost under the Treaty of Versailles, especially the Polish Corridor and the city of Danzig, which separated Germany from Eastern Prussia. Now, Britain and France had guaranteed Poland's independence and therefore declared war on Germany on 3rd September 1939 when Hitler refused to withdraw his forces. So the conflict quickly spread across Europe, marking the beginning of the Second World War. The invasion of Poland was the direct trigger of World War II, but it was only possible because earlier developments such as appeasement, German rearmament, and the weaknesses of the League of Nations had allowed Hitler to become increasingly aggressive without serious opposition. Now, the second cause that is very, very important or paramount was the Versailles Peace Settlement of 1919. The Treaty of Versailles was a major longer-term cause of the Second World War because it created resentment and instability in Germany after the First World War. The treaty blamed Germany for causing the war through the War Guilt Clause, which was Article 231, forced it to pay a heavy reparation, reduced its armed forces, took away its colonies, and removed important territories such as Alsace and Lorraine and parts of Eastern Germany. Now, many Germans viewed the treaty as a national humiliation and called it a dictated peace, or diktat in short. Now, Adolf Hitler exploited his resentment by promising to destroy the treaty, restore German pride, and recover lost territories. His message attracted support from Germans who also wanted revenge and national revival. So, although the treaty, it is important to understand as a historian that although the Treaty of Versailles did not directly cause the war, its harsh terms created bitterness, economic difficulties, and nationalist anger. So Hitler used these grievances to gain popularity and justify his aggressive expansion, making the treaty an important background cause of World War II. So the third cause, or another cause of World War II, was the appeasement policy. Now, the appeasement was the policy adopted mainly by Britain and France during the 1930s, of giving in to some Hitler's demands in order to avoid another major war. Now, in simple terms, this policy tolerated or encouraged great powers like Britain and France to tolerate aggression of dictators like Hitler and Mussolini and Japan, on condition that they did not exceed the limits of common sense. That's why we are saying that during the 1930s, so this policy involved giving in to some of Hitler's demands in order to avoid another major war. In simple terms, seeing the wrongs being done and then you just look away on condition that the situation did not go beyond what is bearable. So after the destruction caused by the First World War, many European leaders wanted to preserve peace. They therefore tolerated Hitler's actions, including Germany's withdrawal from the League of Nations in 1933, rearmament, the remilitarization of the Rhineland in 1936, and the annexation of Austria in 1938. So the most famous example was the Munich Agreement of 1938, where Britain and France allowed Germany to take the Sudetenland from Czechoslovakia. Sudetenland was a region in Czechoslovakia which had a significant portion of German population. So they encouraged Germany to take this region from Czechoslovakia in exchange for Hitler's promise that he would make no further territorial demands. However, Hitler interpreted appeasement as a sign of weakness and continued his expansion by occupying the rest of Czechoslovakia in 1938 and later invading Poland. So it is important to understand as a historian that appeasement delayed the war temporarily but ultimately encouraged Hitler's aggression by convincing him that Britain and France would not act against him. Therefore, it became a major factor that contributed to the outbreak of World War II. Now, the third cause was the arms race. So the arms race was another important cause of World War II because it increased military tension and encouraged aggressive foreign policies. So after Hitler came to power, Germany openly violated the Treaty of Versailles by rebuilding its armed forces. So Germany developed a powerful army, air force, and navy. Other countries, especially Britain, France, and the Soviet Union, also increased their military preparations due to fear of German aggression. Now, the rapid development of weapons such as tanks, aircraft, submarines, and modern artillery made nations more willing to use military force because they believed they could achieve victory. So, as a historian, it is also important to understand that the arms race did not directly start the war, but it created a dangerous atmosphere where countries prepared for conflict rather than peaceful cooperation. It also strengthened militarism and made another major European war more likely. Then, point number 5 on our list is weaknesses of the League of Nations. Now, the League of Nations failed to maintain international peace after World War I, making it easier for aggressive countries to expand without punishment. The League had several weaknesses. It had no permanent army to enforce its decisions. It depended on member states for support and lacked participation, from important powers such as the United States. Now, Britain and France were often unwilling to take strong action because they feared another war. And during the 1930s, the League failed to stop Japanese expansion into Manchuria, that is 1931. So Italy's invasion of Ethiopia, 1935, and Germany's violations of the Treaty of Versailles. So it is also important to understand as a historian that the failure of the League encouraged the dictators like Hitler, Mussolini, and Japanese leaders because they realized that international organizations were too weak to stop aggression. Its failures contributed greatly to the collapse of collective security before World War II. Then the next cause that I'm going to discuss is the economic depression. The Great Economic Depression of 1929 to 1933 created economic hardship that contributed to the rise of aggressive dictators. The economic crisis caused massive unemployment, poverty, and social unrest, especially in Germany. Many Germans blamed the Weimar Republic for failing to solve economic problems. Hitler gained popularity by, promising jobs, economic recovery, and national revival. To be honest, which he did. So economic difficulties also encouraged the countries to adapt aggressive policies to acquire resources and markets. So Japan expanded into Asia, while Germany and Italy pursued territorial expansion to strengthen their economies. So it is important to understand as a historian or as a student of history that the depression did not directly cause World War II, but it weakened democratic governments and created conditions that allowed extremist leaders like Hitler and Mussolini to gain support. Then another cause that I'm going to discuss, another cause of World War II was nationalism. Now, extreme nationalism was a major cause of World War II because it encouraged the countries to seek superiority and territorial expansion. In Germany, Hitler promoted the idea that Germans were a superior race and deserved to control more territory. He also promised to unite all German-speaking people and restore Germany's greatness after the humiliation of the Versailles. Similarly, Italy under Mussolini promoted the aggressive nationalism by seeking to rebuild the glory of ancient Roman Empire, while Japan promoted the idea of Asian domination. So, as a historian or as a student of history, understand that nationalism strengthened the public support for aggressive policies and encouraged the dictators to pursue expansion. Extreme forms of nationalism, therefore, became a powerful force leading to international conflict. So, another factor that cannot be sidelined is imperialism. So, how did imperialism cause World War II? Now, imperialism contributed to World War II because major powers competed for colonies, resources, and global influence. Germany, Italy, and Japan believed they had been unfairly denied colonies and wanted to expand their territories. So Hitler sought Lebensraum in Eastern Europe. Mussolini invaded Ethiopia in 1939, and Japan expanded into Asia and Southeast Asia, into China and Southeast Asia. So these aggressive imperial ambitions brought these countries into conflict with Britain, France, and other powers, defending their own interests. So, it is also important to understand that imperialism increased rivalry between nations and encouraged military expansion. It was therefore an important underlying cause of World War II. Then let us also look at anti-Semitism. So anti-Semitism as another cause of World War II. Anti-Semitism or hatred and discrimination against Jewish people was a central feature of Nazi ideology and contributed to the policies that led to World War II. Hitler blamed Jews for Germany's problems, including defeat in World War I and the economic difficulties. The Nazi government introduced discriminatory laws, including the Nuremberg Laws of 1935, which removed Jewish rights and citizenship. Now, as Germany expanded during the war, Nazi persecution developed into the Holocaust, where approximately 6 million Jews were systematically murdered. So, it is important to understand that anti-Semitism was not the main direct cause of the war, but it was a major element of Nazi ideology that justified Hitler's racial policies, territorial expansions, and the brutal occupation of conquered territories. Then let us also look at the communist threat as another point. The communist threat. Fear of communism influenced international politics before World War II. So after the Russian Revolution of 1917, many European governments feared the spread of communism. Hitler gained support partly by presenting Nazism as a defense against communist revolution. So some Western leaders initially tolerated Hitler because they believed Nazi Germany could serve as a barrier against the Soviet Union. This weakened resistance to Hitler's early expansion. So it is important to understand as a historian that the fear of communism indirectly contributed to World War II by influencing appeasement policies and encouraging some countries to underestimate the danger posed by Nazi Germany. Then finally, let us have this as our last point or as our last cause, and it is the Spanish Civil War, which happened from 1936 to 1939. So the Spanish Civil War became a testing ground for the weapons and strategies that would later be used in World War II. The conflict was fought between the Republican government and the nationalist forces led by General Francisco Franco. Germany and Italy supported Franco, while the Soviet Union supported the Republicans. So Germany used the war to test new military technology, including aircraft, while Italy gained experience in modern warfare. So understand this as a history student. Although the Spanish Civil War did not directly cause World War II, it increased the tensions between democratic and fascist powers and demonstrated the growing strength of dictatorships. It also encouraged Hitler and Mussolini to continue aggressive policies. So in simple terms, the Second World War resulted from a combination of immediate and long-term causes. So the invasion of Poland was the direct trigger, but deeper causes, as we have discussed, included the unfair Treaty of Versailles, the appeasement, failure of the League, economic depression, aggressive nationalism, imperialism, militarism, and the rise of totalitarian dictatorships. So therefore, World War II was not simply caused by Hitler's actions alone. Rather, it developed from unresolved problems after World War I and the failure of the international community to prevent aggression.